Well, hi, welcome to my class. Today we're making sublimation ornaments. I'm going to show two different ways to make these ornaments. One is using Design Space and Cricut and infusible ink. The other way is to use a sublimation printer with sublimation ink. If sublimation is new to you or you've never used infusible ink before, let me jump in first with a little bit of a craft and science lesson. I want to teach you how this craft process works, and that will help you understand what's actually happening as you go through the different processes. Sublimation is a chemical process that happens when special ink printed on special paper is heated up to a high temperature and pressed onto a special base. So the ink reacts with polyester fabric and blanks that have been specially prepared for sublimation. Mug or a coaster or a pillowcase or even these sublimation ornaments. Most often you will find these sublimation blanks in a white color. Other colors of a base would not show off the colors of ink very well. You can kind of think about it like this. If you have a dark colored paper or really intensely colored paper and you try and color on it with markers, most of the colors are not going to show up, or they're going to at least look funny. But if you use markers on a white piece of paper, then you get the true colors of those markers. Same thing with putting infusible ink onto different bases. There are some light colored blanks, like maybe a light gray, so like a light gray fabric, that would show off some of the colors, and black would show up, the black ink. But the important thing is that the fabric either has a high polyester count or you have a different kind of blank that's been prepared for sublimation. If you just go pick up a regular mug from the dollar store or a regular cotton t-shirt, those are not going to react right with the ink, and either it won't transfer at all or it won't transfer permanently. So with the infusible ink sheets from Cricut, basically you have a plastic carrier sheet, and on that is a paper layer, and then printed on the paper layer is a pattern or color of this infusible ink. And so then you can design in Design Space, cut out shapes and phrases, and apply those to your sublimation blank. The other way is to use your own sublimation printer to print your own designs. And there are a couple of ways to do this. I'm not going to go into all of the different types of machines or all of the different ways that you'll test your colors and your prints, but I have an Epson printer that I bought brand new, and instead of putting the regular Epson ink in it, I put the sublimation ink. So you print that ink onto sublimation paper. It has been specially designed to hold the ink, hold the right amount of ink, release the ink when it's heated. So those might look like this. You can use patterns, images, your own pictures. So it's a really fun way to either put your own designs on things or customize things with photographs. Like I said, I'm not really going into the details of how to fine-tune your prints to get the right colors, how to do the testing, but I will just say two things. The colors that you see when you print, or the color that you see of the infusible ink sheet, is not totally true to what you're going to see after you press. So when you're testing out print settings, temperature settings, time settings, you always want to press your design or your picture to see if you're happy with the colors. If you just look at what comes out of the printer, it's not going to look right, and that's okay. Everything brightens up. The colors can shift a little bit after they've been pressed. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good overview. Let's go jump into Design Space, and I'll show you how to use the Cricut and infusible ink first. All right, so we're going to start first in Design Space, because this is how you can use a Cricut and infusible ink to make these ornaments, even if you don't have a sublimation printer. So bring in a circle from the Shapes panel, and we're going to change it to 2.87 inches. That is the width of our sublimation ornaments. If you buy a brand that's different than mine, you'll want to make sure that your circle matches the dimensions of your ornament. I'm going to come in here and search bride and groom and look for a couple that I like. You can scroll through, there's lots of other designs here, and then I'm going to search for banner. We are going to use both of these images to make an ornament that commemorates their wedding, their first Christmas together, okay? So start by positioning and resizing both of those images. And you can see we need to get rid of some of the bride and groom image because right now it's hanging off the edge of the ornament. So duplicate the banner and then select the first banner and the bride and groom silhouette and hit slice. Then delete the extra pieces. Click on the bride and groom, then click contour so we can get rid of that bottom extra piece. Now that curved line that goes across their legs exactly matches the curved line of the banner. And so that way we can lay our two infusible ink pieces exactly next to each other, and they'll basically become one design with no overlapping. All right, next we're going to add a last name into the banner. And so you can just click on the type icon, type the name into the box. I'm using just all capital letters, and the font that I'm going to use is this one from the favorite fonts. I'm going to use the curve tool here, and if you move the slider to the left, the word will curve upward. So then I'm going to zoom in here so I can see closer to check the size and the placement of those letters. And now that I'm in a little closer, I'm going to adjust the curve a little bit more and then drop down the size of the font a little bit because I want it to fit inside that banner, but I don't want it to be too small because we still need to be able to cut it out. Okay, so once they're basically placed, I'm going to come in and just tweak the curve a little bit and then ungroup them to letters so that I can fill in that space around the W. So ungroup to letters, and then I can select just the A and nudge it over a little bit. Same with the R and the O on the other side. And then when that looks good, then I'm going to select each of those letters together. So over here in the layers panel, you can click Shift and then click each one of the letters. When all the letters are selected, I'm going to hit Combine and then Weld. And so now that's just one path, one layer. Then I'm going to line that up with the banner again. I'm going to go ahead and do the center horizontal. And when that looks good, then I'll hit Slice. Now the banner has the letters cut out, and so we'll cut that out of infusible ink. The banner will be colored, and the name will be the white ornament showing through. All right, now I'm going to take that same circle and use it for sizing our next ornament. So here I'm going to go to Images and search for Snowflake. And I'm going to pick a few that I like and add them all to my canvas at the same time. And then that way I can look at them next to each other, compare, and see what I like the best. All right, so then as I look at each of these snowflakes, the one here on the bottom is my favorite. And then I can use this space in the center to put an initial. Another thing that's nice is since I can see that this snowflake has some thicker lines than some of the other ones that I brought in, I know it's going to cut out okay with the infusible ink, whereas some of those with really, really tiny lines just might get too small at the ornament size. All right, for this one, I'm going to pick Agent Q. That's actually a good size already. Really quick here, I need to change the size of the circle a little bit bigger because I'm going to make the circle cutout be the infusible ink and the snowflake is going to be white. So I need a little bit of overhang around the edges of the ornament so that I can get a complete edge-to-edge transfer of ink. So I'm just going to change the size to 2.94 inches, and then we'll just make sure that the snowflake is smaller than that and fits inside of it nicely. I will select them both and under Align, hit Center. And then with both of those still selected, I'm going to go under Combine and hit Exclude. And it's basically just going to make the S disappear from the center of the snowflake. All right, and then I want my snowflake to be smaller than my circle. And then I'll select the circle and the design. Again, under Align, hit Center, and then hit Exclude again. So now the whole snowflake shape has been cut out of the circle. So the circle will be the color of the infusible ink, and the snowflake will be the white ornament showing through. So then when I go to make these, I need to make sure that each mat is mirrored, because infusible ink gets flipped upside down when we apply it. So we cut it with the colored side up, and it needs to be mirrored. I'll click continue and it will connect to my maker. You can do this with Maker or Explorer or Joy. So I'm going to choose the infusible ink transfer sheet, and in my experience with my machines, it's worked best when I hit more pressure, and then by checking this box, it will keep these same settings for every mat. I won't have to change it every time. And then this is what the Design Space screen looks like as it's checking the blade and then going through cutting that design. This is how I recommend putting infusible ink on a mat. I slide the mat underneath the open door and then just barely roll off a little end from the infusible ink sheet. It really likes to hold its curl coming out of the box. And then I just slowly press it on this way, and that seems to help it lay flat on the mat, and then you don't get your ink side stuck down to the mat somewhere where you don't want it. All right, so I'm going to load it in. It's going to check that the right blade is installed, just like it was showing in Design Space. And then when it's verified that that's the fine point blade, the arrow button will start flashing, and then I'll push that to start cutting. Here you can see the real-time cutting speed of this snowflake. And then here I'm going to speed it up to about 4 times the speed. When it's done cutting, push the unload button and then flip the mat over and peel the mat away from the infusible ink sheet. And that way you won't get any weird bends or creases in your sheet. Okay, and then you're just going to continue that process with the black infusible ink and the color for the banner. And then one thing you can see here, I want you to notice that the ink sheet here is brown, but it's going to turn out black when I press it. So just like we talked about before, you can't completely trust what you're seeing before it's pressed. All right, and again, talking about color for a minute, I've pulled out all 4 sheets from this package, and it's clear which one is going to press red and which one is going to press yellow. But then we have these 2 different blues. And the way I can tell that this one is the teal is looking really close to it. There is a little bit of green undertone. And then this one here is much darker. This first one is going to be the teal, and the other one is going to be the dark blue. All right, so when all of those finish cutting, then it's time to peel away all of the extra infusible ink. And I just do this with my hands. That way there's no scratching of the ink into parts of the carrier sheet or anything like that that might happen using a weeding hook. And you can see as I'm doing some of these small pieces, I'm kind of bending the carrier sheet a little bit, and that helps some of the edges of the infusible ink pop up. And then when doing the outside part, you can either try and peel up from the corner or kind of peel and tear right where the design starts. One thing to be careful of when you're doing the letters of the banner is make sure that any inside parts of the letters, like the inside of the O and the inside of the A, stay stuck down to the sheet. So just peel up the letter, go slow to make sure that you're not picking up the center of the letter. If it does start to come up a little bit, just try and press it back down and just pull the letter off. And then the last one I'm doing here is the snowflake. Remember that the snowflake is going to stay white, so that's the part we're tearing away, and then everything else is blue. So take out one of the ornaments, and then with a lint roller or some other tape, just kind of go over the top of it and make sure that there's no lint or little dust pieces on top of the ornament. And then this one, we made the circle just a little bit larger than our ornament. And so it worked best for me to line up the top where the hole is. I want that right on the top of where the S is in the snowflake. Then I'm using a little bit of heat resistant tape to just tape down in 2 or 3 spots to just make sure that that doesn't move. This is going to make sure that nothing shifts position while we're pressing it, because that can make the edges of your design turn out a little bit blurry. All right, and then this is the other one we're going to do with the infusible ink. Take off any dust. And so here you can see that I have taken our couple and taken that one piece off of its carrier sheet, and I'm going to stick it down so that line matches exactly with the banner. Then I'm going to work on centering the banner at the bottom of the ornament underneath the little hanging hole. You want to make sure that their heads don't go on top of that hole because of course nothing will press there. Okay, so then once I have that positioned, again, I'm going to use a couple of pieces of this heat tape to make sure that design stays in place while it's being pressed. The kind that I'm using here is the blue heat tape from Cricut. It's worked really well every time that I've used it, and I have seen that sometimes people have trouble with the yellow color or gold color of heat tape. It can sometimes stain your final project. So I recommend this blue kind from Cricut. So the way that I'm going to press these is I have an easy press mat laid out, and then I have a small piece of butcher paper that I've laid down. And then my ornaments are face down, so the design is down on that butcher paper. And then I have another piece of butcher paper on top. So it's sandwiched in this butcher paper so that I don't get any ink accidentally on my mat or on my heat press. So I'm using the Cricut Easy Press, and I have it set to a temperature of 380 and time 150 seconds. I move my hands to a few different positions on the Easy Press because I'm putting down a lot of pressure. I'm trying to be really careful to not shift the press around at all, but I'm pressing down on the corners and in the middle just to make sure that there's good pressure for the whole time that the timer is running down on the press. Okay, then after letting it cool for a couple of minutes, you can start to take everything apart. But remember, these are still going to be very hot, so please use gloves, unless you want to wait 20 minutes or so for them to cool down so they're cool to the touch. One thing that's nice, if you are a little more patient, then it's easier to get the tape off because it doesn't stick to your gloves and everything. You can see here all of that ink transferred off onto the ornament, and that's how it looks when it's all finished. You get just a little bit of that kind of distressed pattern of the infusible ink that we used. And then here is our wedding ornament. All right, so you'll peel off the tape and then take off those infusible ink pieces. All right, look, so our letters are really nice and clean lines, and that brown infusible ink sheet turned into a perfect black when it was pressed. Next, I'm going to show you how I use my sublimation printer to print photos or images that I've downloaded from someplace like Creative Fabrica. I usually like to print from Adobe Illustrator. Some people like to use Photoshop, some people use Canva, and some people use a Google Doc like this. I'm just going to show you in Google Docs because it's something that everyone has access to. But again, it just depends on the programs that you have. So I've just brought 2 images in here into this Google Doc, and then I'm going to resize them because right now they're too big. So I'm just going to use the measurement markings across the top of the doc to just kind of get a good idea of how big this picture is going to print out. I want to make sure that it's about 3 inches across, and then I'll have my 2.87 inches to easily fill in that ornament. Then when I have both of these the right size, I can go to print and just make sure that I have my Epson printer selected. And like I said, I've already gone through some settings previously, so I know that it's going to print at a high quality. I know it's going to mirror my image when it prints. So I can just click print from here, and then it's going to print out on my sublimation paper. This is what my Epson printer looks like, and then here is my print. So I'm going to take out a couple of ornaments here. This particular package that I bought, each one came individually wrapped in little bubble wrap sleeves. And just like I did with the infusible ink, I'm going to just make sure that there's no dust or lint sitting on the surface here. Those can either make little dark spots or little light spots when you press the image on. I'll use some regular scissors to just cut each of these apart so they're easier to work with. So I'm going to take the side that I cleaned and flip it over on top of the image, and then I'll use a couple of pieces of this heat tape to secure it so the image doesn't move. Once the tape is on, I'm going to take the scissors and just trim a little bit more of that excess paper around the edges. I want to make sure that I get the little baby face centered on the ornament. And so I'm just going to make a little mark up here, and that way I can line up the hanging hole of the ornament, and that will be my center line. And then my photo will be centered where I want it to be on the ornament as well. Just like before, I'll tape it down with a couple of pieces of heat tape. Then I'm going to take a piece of butcher paper and lay it on my Easy Press mat. Then I'll put the ornaments so that the backside is facing up, and then I'll cover it with another piece of butcher paper. This protects my mat and the base plate of my Easy Press from getting ink accidentally transferred onto them. For these prints, I have my Easy Press set to 370 degrees and 160 seconds. I'm using pretty good pressure, just like before, and that really helps the design get all the way to the edges because it's kind of pressing down into that Easy Press mat a little bit. I'm using my gloves still because, of course, they're very hot. And look, we've got that 3D looking Santa and our cute little baby photo. Then this is how I like to tie on a string or ribbon to hang these, because if you just thread it through one side and then tie a knot, it's going to hang sideways. So I tie a knot in the thread so that it's like a loop, and then I stick the end of the loop through the hole and then grab the knot and pull that all tight so that it snugs up against the top of the ornament. My package of ornaments came with 12 little hanging ribbons already cut, but they're quite short. So you're going to want probably somewhere between 7 inches total, all the way up to maybe 15 to 18 inches, depending on how long you want your hanging loop to be. And then, of course, some of you are going to want to know, can these ornaments be sublimated on both sides? And the answer is yes. So here I'm going to take our wedding ornament, and on the back side I have cut out a piece of infusible ink that says Our First Christmas 2023, and I'm going to use the same settings that I used when I first pressed. And I just want you to notice here a little bit of the black transferred from the ornament to the paper underneath, but it didn't affect the quality of that first press. You could also press both sides at the same time. You just want to be careful that you don't have any tape that crosses over onto the back side and would get in the way of one of the images transferring. So that might be something you want to practice a couple of times before you make a whole batch of them. All right, so I hope you got some great ideas on how you can make your own ornaments with your own custom designs on them. Whether you're decorating for a certain color or a theme, or you're looking for gifts, or you want to sell these, lots of great options. If you have any questions about any of the things that I did here in this video, about different supplies that I like to use, or you're coming up with any problems in your project, then be sure to let me know and we can figure that out. Thanks for hanging out with me while we made these sublimation ornaments, and I will see you around the internet. Bye.